In this video, I want to be completely honest with myself. And first off, I want to say that I actually do enjoy Gambit. Like, I'm serious. I'm not a masochist or anything. Like, I do enjoy doing things like this.
So like, what? Do you have to throw straight up? Faster, but
as of recently, Gambit gets a bad rep for, a lot of defined reasons. Multiple posts on Reddit, angry Twitch chatters, big sighs on Twitter whenever an exotic quest requires like 30 invader kills or something like that. Trust me, I get it. I understand all the problems. However, Luke Smith, in one of the parts of the State of the Game write-ups, questioned the community about the future of Gambit and where development resources should go to perfect the mode. Choosing between Gambit or Gambit Prime, and which one should be expanded upon and tweaked. I have a lot of strong opinions about both modes, but those opinions will come at the end of this discussion. Because first, I need to go into about what this whole project was about, this whole project that I hyped up and talked about on multiple occasions. So over the past week, I played 50 straight Gambit matches. Yeah, I had 50 straight matches with no interruptions, except for, well, food, work, and sleep. But I didn't play any other game, and the only thing I played in Destiny over this week was Gambit. I decided to play 25 normal matches and 25 prime matches as a decent sample size about what I'm trying to go into. Now, I didn't play 25 normal matches by itself and then 25 prime. I did it in a rotating order. One normal Gambit match, then one Gambit Prime match, and so forth. A massive reason behind this experiment, was to amass a large amount of data to help solidify my points and reasoning beyond my judgment of Gambit, as well as maybe persuade you to my opinions later on in the video. I would say, as a player myself, I tend to fall in the above average category as a Gambit player. I'm not the greatest in the world, and I'm not terrible, but I do tend to be higher up in the leaderboards for the majority of my games. Now, originally I was going to put a section here about my loadout, but my loadout changes pretty frequently between all of these matches. Most of the time I am rocking a sniper and I am rocking recluse because, well, if you're not using recluse, then you're pretty much cutting off one of your own arms at this point. But sometimes I would use hammerhead, sometimes I'd use 1000 voices, and then I would also switch some of my armor pieces around depending on the situation. Most of the time I would run stompies, but then maybe switch over to Glisten Vest if I wanted to go for Middle Tree Night Stalker, or sometimes I'll go Blade Barrage and Shards of Galanor for the third round in a normal Gambit match. It all just depends. So that's the beginning of explaining what the project is for now. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at what type of data I decided to extract and why I decided to extract it. So over the course of this week, I went ahead and played all 50 of these matches. I decided to rotate playlists after every match to reduce stagnation and fatigue from playing one specific mode for 25 straight matches. I also split up the 50 matches over the week because, well, I work 8 hours a day. I can't, there's no way I could fit in 50 matches in one day. Come on. After every single game, I would tab out and then add data from every match into a spreadsheet. The variables were split into 3 separate groups. The first one being time, which, it's self-explanatory. Is the amount of how long a match lasted. A big part of Gambit Prime's favor from the community currently is that it tends to be a faster event than normal Gambits. The second variable is a bit strange, but stay with me, I'll explain it. It's enjoyment. The third group is my explanation for the level of enjoyment I give a certain match, as well as explain any form of outliers within the dataset. So let's take a look at that enjoyment segment. In order to quantify an arbitrary data point of enjoyment, I decided to not look at my personal enjoyment of a match, which is usually me rolling a team or having a bunch of invades or whatever it may be. That's what I usually like to do with my personal enjoyment. But to actually retool my thoughts on what makes Gambit an enjoyable experience, which to many might sound kind of crazy, but trust me, it can be done, sort of. Gambit is defined by Bungie, by the way. This is by Bungie. Gambit is defined as a PvEvP competitive mode. So enjoyment is in competitive enjoyment. From what I can gather, it's usually when teams are neck and neck, both playing at their best ability in order to win the game. So to quantify enjoyment in this project, I made a 5-point ranking system. So let's start in the middle. A 3 is best described as an average level of competitive enjoyment. Both teams are trying to win, and even if a game ends in a 2-0 or 0-2 or whatever, and even if rules are fluid and everyone's just doing whatever it means to win, that would probably be the average game. Moving down to a 2, this is whenever a team just completely overpowers the other team. Either my team rolls the other one, or I get rolled myself, to a point to where these matchups shouldn't have even been made in the first place. A 1, which is the lowest possible score, will more than likely, and hopefully, be an outlier score. This is when the matchup has people that leave in the middle of the game, AFK the game, or directly troll by feeding invasion kills and more. Or if I join into an in-progress game and the game is practically over. I didn't expect much of this to happen on a regular basis, so this is my negative outlier. A 4 is when everyone is neck and neck and it goes to either overtime or it's like by the hair that the game wins in whoever's favor. These games tend to run a lot longer and are just genuinely close games with, just a lot of fun to be had. A 5, which is the positive outlier, is the form of a perfect matchup, where people are playing their roles where applicable and everyone is playing to the best of their ability, where endgame results are highly comparable, everyone's using game chat or whatever. These games will go down to the wire where everyone is relying on everyone. But like on the opposite spectrum, I don't expect much or possibly any of these games to happen given the current climate of players. I decided not to add in endgame results into the data points because while I am playing solo, I feel that it wouldn't be that applicable to what I'm trying to figure out from all of this. Maybe in another test in the future. So, after all 50 games, what do I have to show for it? What did I find out from everything? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the data. When looking at the data, we can see that for normal Gambit, the length of matches were on average about 11 minutes and 25 seconds, with the longest game being 14 minutes and 53 seconds. For Gambit Prime, the length of matches on average were 7 minutes and 42 seconds, with the longest match being 9 minutes and 37 seconds. If my math is correct, which I'm not sure if it is, hopefully it is, that would mean that Gambit Prime in this test had matches that were 32% shorter than the average normal Gambit match. Now, when looking at the average scores of competitive enjoyment for normal Gambit, the score is around 2.92, with only 1 negative outlier during the entire experience and 0 positive outliers. With Gambit Prime, the average competitive enjoyment score was even lower at a score of 2.55, with 6 total negative outliers during the 25 games, which equates to about 24% of matches having a negative outlier, such as joining in progress games that were clearly already over. And the verdict for all this, well, these results honestly shouldn't shock anyone too much. Normal Gambit tends to have a lot longer matches than Gambit Prime. However, one thing you should notice is how many outliers Gambit Prime tends to have over normal Gambit. A lot more people tend to just not play Prime or throw matches on a consistent basis over those 25 games versus that of normal. In general, there tends to be a lower competitive enjoyment score on Gambit Prime, which I will go a bit into further in my total rundown of thoughts and opinions. Normal Gambit, even though with its long runtime, tend to be a lot more enjoyable from a competitive aspect, with closer matches, which made the runtime longer, as well as people doing their job and trying to win the game as best as they can. None of the matches I played had a positive outlier. Literally none of them. At no point did I have a single team with callouts or communication based around invading, invaders, melting bosses, or hell, even just a little chit-chat. Chat stayed unused unless it was for an insult from someone calling me or my team trash. So, with all this data accumulated, what does it all mean in the end? Is any of this indicative of where Bungie should take Gambit. Does all this data mean anything? Is it truly I'm just gonna be fucking honest. None of this data was useful. This was a giant waste of my fucking time. All right. I'll explain everything about why it's a giant waste of my time. Blah blah blah. I'm just gonna let you know that this part of the script, there's a bit of ranting. So if you don't want ranting, just skip a couple minutes ahead. All right. First, let me delve deeper into my actual personal enjoyment of this entire experiment in data collecting. I maybe enjoyed 1 or 2 matches of each mode personally out of the entire thing. This project was not fun at all. I had to stop streaming on multiple occasions and dreaded loading into Destiny over the week of this project because I forced myself to only play Gambit. So let's talk about some general problems between the modes before dissecting them individually. Heavy fucking weapons desperately ruined the experience of Gambit. Remember when they nerfed Sleeper Simulant because of its potency in Gambit when the mode launched? I mean, it was a good change. Then Queenbreakers came in and got nerfed in the Season of the Drifter. All was good for a while until the Hammerhead took over, but at least that weapon could be defended against if you were good with your team. Now, Bungie decided to add back in the literal bane of my fucking existence with Gambit. Truth. All of these weapons got nerfed because of their potency, and they bring back truth for some fucking reason. A literal crutch for the worst players ever in the entire fucking game. You sitting in the back of the map, you're gonna get the truth. Trying to run away to get a better vantage point, you're getting the truth. Thinking you're safe in that vantage point, truth. It doesn't matter what mode you're playing in, you're getting truth. But in general, heavy weapons in Gambit completely ruin any form of competitive skill in this mode. They're all crutches that need little to no skill to effectively use when invading and when fighting against invaders. To put it bluntly, remove heavy ammo and lock out heavy weapons in Gambit. For some of my matches, I tried to only snipe, but when you're getting truth, when you're getting 1,000 voices just screaming up your face, you get pissed off. You get a little bit mad, and then you gotta, swap on Hammerhead yourself and snipe him from across the map. You gotta use 1K to hit him from across the map. I didn't fucking use truth because I will never use that fucking weapon in my life. Snipers and shotguns are enough to create a big enough skill gap in this competitive mode. Okay, enough ranting on heavy. Let's get into some more problems. Talking about normal Gambit, I highly enjoy this mode over Prime. Snowballing practically never happened in this mode. You always felt like you can make a comeback because of the primeval damage phases and, good consistent invading times. If you had a good invader on your team, you have a higher chance of making a comeback when behind in the match. It led to very clutch, intense moments that made the competitive and my personal enjoyment that much better over Prime. Maybe you lost a bunch of motes early on in the game from a good invader. Well, you aren't fucked. You still have a chance to make a comeback. Gambit Prime snowballs way too quickly. If teams aren't both banking consistently, and one team gets the primeval phase with a decent amount of time before the other team does, the game's over at that point, because of the primeval Slayer stacks and limited invasion time. And let's talk about Prime Armor. Yeah, no one fucking uses it. At all. Since Season of the Drifter, because no one in Shadowkeep is going to play the Reckoning, let alone do weeks of grinding to get Notorious Armor. Meaning, if one team just so happens to have that armor, which will more than likely not be Armor 2.0, they will win guaranteed because of the buffs. Gambit Prime is so far from a competitive experience that should not even be considered the best example of Gambit. It's quite literally the worst form of PvP experience in the entirety of the Destiny franchise. Okay, I'm gonna stop ranting. I said at the beginning of that it was going to be a rant, so let's just get into something else. So this video has quickly turned into more of a rant than what I initially wanted it to be. So let's try to make some propositions to fix these ailments. in the perfected version of what Gambit should be, I believe what should be made is role queues. If Bungie wants to create a true competitive experience for Gambit, keep and tweak some of the Prime armor buffs, but make it a role buff instead, because new late players, who have access to Prime by the way, aren't going to play Reckoning or even know about the armors to begin with. If Gambit is supposed to be a competitive experience, then there needs to be a ranking system to go along with it. Crucible has Valor and Glory. Gambit only has Infamy, which has nothing to do with the skill of players. So give it a glory-based ranking system or something. I'm not sure if Gambit has skill-based matchmaking, because the skills of the players I was playing with and against were literally all over the place. So with a ranking system and matchmaking to go with it, this can help fix that problem. Locked loadouts are sadly another thing that needs to be in place. I shouldn't be able to quickly swap over from Arc and Stompies to Shards of Galanor and Blade Barrage for the tie-breaking match and use Infinite Super to win, which, in itself is a fucking problem. Next, consistent invasion schedules like normal Gambit should try to fix snowballing that happens in Prime. It's a massive problem, and a good invader should be able to buy time for a team to make a comeback. Another fix. Get rid of taken captains as the middle fucking blocker. Having an RNG enemy that constantly just jumps around you is just plain stupid. Bring back the phalanxes, but keep the goblins and the taken knight. Please, I don't want to see the taken ogres ever again in this fucking mode. And last, but certainly not least, remove heavy weapons from Gambit. Lock them out. Don't allow me to equip them at all. Heavy weapons are complete cheese, especially weapons like Truth, 1000 Voices, Hammerhead, among others. They are a crutch to fall upon, and if you don't invade with heavy, you're pretty much a detriment to your team. Invaders should not be able to sweep an entire team within seconds with a homing rocket from across the map. It's mind-boggling that Bungie would add back in such a broken weapon after nerfing the hell out of less potent weapons, which were still broken, don't mind you, just they were never on the same level as Truth. And to be honest, I think that's it. Those are my solutions to Gambit. I am pretty much never going to step into these two modes until fixes come, which probably won't be for a couple of seasons. It might not even be in this current iteration of Destiny. Gambit and Prime have no use to play except for light level gains, and even then, it's not worth wanting to rip your hair out of your skull just to play. Whew, oh man. So I hope you all enjoyed this breakdown of Gambit and Gambit Prime that I decided to do. They are far, incredibly far, from being a competitive PvPvE mode, which honestly is a damn shame. Because when it released, I enjoyed it a lot more than Crucible, and I wish it went back to the launch days, when we all sort of enjoyed Gambit, for the most part, and wanted it to be, tournaments, community tournaments, and stuff like that. So, thank you all for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your week while I go see my therapist.